people get burnt out. Man, I could never do just steaks. I'm like, that's because you cook terrible steaks. Like, it literally looks like you threw it in a cup.
Hello, carnivores, and welcome to session number 37. CarnivoreJT is with us today. He is the host of the Inner Carnivore Podcast, also an Equip Food sponsored athlete. He has a carnivore cookbook, and my favorite recipe before we dive into that is definitely the kale smoothie. JT is going to teach us his most popular cooking methods. Before we jump into the meat, here's our Spotify podcast review of the week. This is from Vitaly Sivakovas. I'm so sorry, brother. I'm really working on your last name. But he says, very interesting stuff. I use pink Himalayan salt, but I might switch to sea salt next time. Thank you for sharing. That was in regards to number 33, Introduction to Sea Salts with Michael Seelick. Thank you for the love, Vitaly. Pink Himalayan salt is an upgrade from the sodium that 99% of people get. CarnivoreJT, welcome to Carnivore Coach's Corner.
How's it going?
Doing great, pal. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. So can we start diving into some recipes and stuff, or you just want to catch up? Like, man, like what's been going on in your world lately, man? You've been crushing the podcast, huh?
Yeah. So podcast in full swing. Our episode just released last week, I believe it was.
Yep.
Cookbook just came out. Started working on a second one, more focused towards B.E.B.B, which is what I'm currently doing right now. Which is a little difficult because you run into some limitations.
Beef, butter, bacon, eggs?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, working on that, getting ready for the holidays, just everything full swing.
Yeah. Rock on. You've been putting on some muscle lately, man. What's your training look like?
So my goal right now is to the profile picture that is on all of my socials was taken back in May, I believe, May or April. And that was right at 180 pounds. And so from about there through September, my goal was to put on size as much as I could. And then once I hit about 205 pounds, the goal was to cut back down again. So currently in the middle of that, training is looking pretty standard. I don't go to a commercial gym, so I'm a little bit limited. But I do a typical, 5-day a week split, hit each muscle group once a week, no cardio. And as far as diet, I've always been a little loose carnivore, but went a little more strict with the B.E.B.B to help shed the last few pounds. And yeah, it's going well. Been about 3 weeks into that. I'm about 192 right now. So a little bit of ways to go to get an apples to apples comparison of how I'm looking.
Yeah, and you have very visible abs, very visible obliques right now, and you're not doing any cardio. Most people would call bullcrap on that one. How are you able to have that kind of conditioning without doing any cardio?
So I love the people that say you have to do one or the, like, you have to do something, right? You have to do cardio to get lean. You have to do this. You have to, this is, we talked about in our podcast, this is not my first rodeo as far as leaning down.
Yeah.
In the past, I've always worked cardio in, but also in the past, I've never needed cardio until that last 5 or 10 pounds. This route, I honestly don't think I'm going to need it even for then. And it's literally just diet, right? So I've done it enough that I have discovered certain foods that trigger and keep me from losing weight. I'm not necessarily an anti-calories in, calories out, but I also understand that there's certain foods that I eat that are just going to keep me from getting really lean, and dairy's one of them. So
Wow, really?
Yeah, I've never been able. I can get lean, I can get.
So just to clarify, even if the macros are like the same, you're gonna get leaner if you take out the dairy. That's interesting because I've seen the same thing with bacon. When we kept all the macros the same and just swapped out bacon for red meat, that did it too. So anything that you can do to change what you're eating and not have to put yourself in a situation where you're eating less, it's gold, and you got to capitalize on every single trick. And I think as a carnivore too, it's like you're consuming what, 5 to 10 ingredients by the end of the day, right?
Yeah. And I don't even necessarily eat, bacon or eggs every single day. So the vast majority of the days I'm eating beef and salt, and I'll put butter on top just for a little bit of, sauce type texture. But yeah, no, I'm not eating very many ingredients at all.
Right. And then the more that you can maximize your digestion, and the more that you can have less of your energy going to that, you have more energy for your workouts, you're getting better sleep, and the whole you got to look at the entire big picture.
Yeah, and
I love it.
I've always known that. Like if you had asked me a couple years ago, like how are you going to lose weight, I would have been like, all right, I lower down my carbs, I get rid of dairy, I get rid of alcohol. And so this time around, I was like, I'm going to see if I can do it while keeping dairy. And I lost some weight. Like I started to trim up a little bit, but I hit a wall, like right around the upper 190s, about 197, 198. I just hit a wall that I couldn't get through. And I was there for a couple weeks, which is unusual for me because I lose pretty quickly. And so I was like, man, I don't want to do it, but I'm going to have to get rid of it. So I kicked it. And since then, see, we're 3 weeks in and I'm down 12 pounds.
Wow. Congratulations. And you feel hungry now after losing weight, or feel like you need to do a crazy reverse diet or anything, like you wreck your metabolism?
That's the big thing, right? Like you and I both done the diets where, we sit there and we're like, man, I'm so hungry, but no, I can't eat. I can't eat. It's after 6 o'clock, can't eat. I'm just not. Like some days I'll eat a little more calories than, I typically plan for. Some days I'll eat less. I just eat until I'm hungry and then I stop. And honestly, it's kind of shifted into a 2 meal a day type deal. I haven't eaten yet today just because I'm not hungry yet. I'll eat, probably after this and then eat a couple hours later. And that'll be the extent of my food for the day.
Wow. Okay. So you're a 2 meal a day guy, huh?
Yeah, not necessarily by plan. Like it just kind of morphed into that. If I eat a smaller meal first, like I have 4 eggs and a couple pieces of bacon, then I might have a third meal in there. But it just kind of morphed into 2 meals a day seems to be where my sweet spot is.
Bro, this is crazy. This is like you just copied my meal plan, pal. Because okay. So I just got off of 7 weeks straight of a strict lion diet. Okay. So then after the lion diet, I was like, what was the only thing that sucked about it? My macros. Like macros were a bitch on the lion diet, right? So coming into December, I'm like, if I want to make some like noteworthy progress as a bodybuilder, let's add in keto bricks, let's add in butter, and maybe like a few other choice fat sources, but keep everything else lying outside of that. So that's the only thing that I've changed. Just added in keto bricks and butter. And so now my ketones are like doubled every day. My gym performance is better and it's helping my recovery. And so as I think the lion diet is like kind of the fountain of youth, but as an athlete, I think that there's wisdom in using fat strategically here and there. Also, on your back to the no cardio point, I wish that I had your approach to cardio when I did my first 4 shows. My first 4 shows, I did an insane amount of cardio, and I was eating 5 meals a day, standard bro diet, lots of fiber, and I was hungry. I was starving all the time, man. Like it was a nightmare. And and looking back, I'm like, especially after talking to people like you and Dr. Kiltz that understand the consequences of overtraining and the consequences of pushing yourself too hard in athletics and doing too much exercise. It really took a toll on my body. And so these last shows were a night and day difference from 2017, which is the first time I stepped on stage.
Yeah, it's super interesting once you start kind of going this way of eating, how little you rely on what you used in shows prior, right? Like you said, the standard bro diet, you fasted cardio at 5:30 in the morning, the sauna sweated out sessions, just everything that you could to just get rid of every last little ounce. And here I am, like, yeah, I work out at home. I don't even have access to a gym. Like, I just eat a certain way.
Dude, so that was the funny thing with Nate when we were in West Virginia. No, we flew into West Virginia and then we drove up to New Hampshire. That was an 8-hour drive, and then and just the entire time I was with him, like I'm used to bodybuilders, like as a coach, like to my athletes being kind of nervous, like as they get close to their show. But he was, up until that point, he and Mark were like the most relaxed people I've ever coached, and both of their diets were pretty much identical. They were 1 meal a day by the end of it, red meat, water, salt. That's it. and they were fasting just by accident. Like they had no appetite. They were not hungry, either of them, and they were just so relaxed. And I was like, that's a lot different than I've been at any of my even at any of my previous shows.
Yeah, for sure. Me as well.
but then the 2 meals a day. Sorry, last thing on that was so my macros for my first meal are usually like, well, it's a keto brick is usually the first meal, and if not, I'll try to hit the macros like with beef and butter. So like usually around 30 to 40 grams of protein, then like 90 to 100 grams of fat, and then most of my leaner protein like right before bed. I don't know if that's kind of like how you structure it.
Mine are actually pretty similar throughout the day. It's I'm roughly about 70-30. 70% from fat and 30% from protein. And
okay,
it comes out pretty close to a 1-to-1 gram to gram.
So like, what are your macros right now then?
Typically I'll fall at about 2,500 calories and 70% fat, 30% protein, and it ends up being about 190 of each, 190 grams of each.
Okay. So in my brain, I think of that as being 1-to-1. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I approach it. I try to get 1-to-1. And I don't really have to add a whole bunch of fat. Like I said, I'll add a little bit of butter. Like I'll cook eggs and butter, or I'll put a little bit of butter on top of like a steak or a burger. But with what I eat, that's a pretty easy target to hit. And it seems to work out pretty well. I haven't tested ketones a ton. I just got a meter. My first reading was 1.3. So I know I'm about at my sweet spot.
Which meter did you get?
The Keto Mojo, the glucose and ketone combination meter.
Yeah, real similar to what I use. I use Biosense. I have a lot of clients that use Keto Mojo though.
Yeah. So I didn't really, I'm not really necessarily trying to stay in a state of ketosis. I'm like, that's not a big deal to me. I was just curious. I'm like, man, I wonder. I mean, I haven't really eaten carbs since Thanksgiving, right? So I'm about 3 weeks in of virtually no carbs. Anytime you say that, you'll get somebody that's like, do you eat eggs? There's carbs in eggs. I'm like, bro, if it says 0 on the nutrition label, that's good enough for me. I'm not here splitting hairs. Like, I don't eat 48 eggs a day. Like,
yeah. But then you can drill them back and say, do you eat shellfish? Do you eat liver? You know that there's carbs and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Like
there's actually a trace amount of carbs in adipose tissue too, from what I understand.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to split hairs and, all that. I just, eat what you like and feel better. But yeah, so I was curious, and the 1.3 was like, all right, yeah, I'm in a decent, I have a decent amount of ketones. So, which is kind of what I figured, but it's nice to be able to put a number to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be addicting, like chasing the ketone numbers, thinking that like, oh, okay, wow, if I'm in deep ketosis, then my metabolism is increased by 30% and I'm going to have more energy, I'm going to have more clarity. But don't take it as gospel though, because there's margin of error and everything. And like, there's been some days where I start the day and I'm like, man, really? I had 300 grams of fat yesterday and I had 150 grams of protein and I'm still not in ketosis. You've got to be kidding me. But like, I don't know, man, like sometimes your body will go in and out of it as needed. It doesn't have to always be in ketosis. And so when I get people like saying 2 weeks later, oh, I'm not in ketosis, I'm like, how do you feel though? Like, do you have any complaints? No, I'm sleeping better. No, I have more energy. I'm like, okay, well, good. Like, this is a bodybuilding competition, not a ketone competition.
Right? You're not out there trying to set marks on a ketone meter. It's how do you look? How do you feel? And then it's nice to have numbers that back it up.
Right. And then the more data, the better too, though. So like same thing with weighing yourself. That's why I'm like, okay, weigh yourself every day. Is it really important to weigh yourself every day? No, not really. Like, and it can kind of backfire mentally too if you get too attached to what the scale says. But at the end of the week, though, then you have an average. If you weigh yourself once a week, you have no idea. Like it could have been water retention. It could have been, there's a lot of things that can throw those numbers off.
Yeah, because you've stepped on a scale and been 4 pounds heavier than you were the day before, and you're like, I ate perfect. Yeah. And then you've gone off the rails and had the biggest cheat meal known to man, and then you lost weight, and you're like, what is happening right now?
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as I realized what happens when you burn fat, that gave me a lot more peace and understanding. Okay, it really doesn't matter if the scale jumps up or down a little here and there, because whenever you burn fat, I'm sure you know this, but here's your fat cell. It gets the fat leaves and it gets replaced with water, but that water weighs more than the fat does. So even when you do burn fat, this is why any coach that's worth their cents will tell you before a photo shoot or before stepping on stage that you do not want to do it. Hopefully you weren't doing much cardio up until that point in your prep, but that's a conversation for another day. We already had that conversation. But the worst thing you could do is do any cardio right before your competition, because that's when you're going to be retaining water. You're going to be bigger and puffier than you were otherwise. So even if you're not in condition, you probably should have pulled out of the show and not done that show. But even if you're not in condition, the worst thing you can do is do any more cardio. It's what you have is what you're going to show at that point.
For sure.
On your macro tracking again, how confident are you in the accuracy of your fat numbers? Because that is tough to track, man. I'm not like, at least for me, it's hard for me to track.
Yeah, it's super hard. Especially
what I'm trying to say is I'm not confident. Do you have anything for me, pal?
So you can go a couple ways with it, right? You can go to the fact that on a nutrition label, according to the USDA, you have a 20% margin of error. Right. Yeah. So that right there throws you out of the window. Right. Then there's the fact that if you're cooking any type of meat, there's a good chance you're going to lose some of that fat to either it's still in the pan or you lose it to the barbecue or it gets cooked off. Like, so again, that's why I like to track my macros. Not super hardcore, but just for an idea, because all I'm looking for is a general range. And then I just listen to how I feel based on that, right? I can tell if I haven't eaten enough fat. I can tell if my electrolytes are low. Because I'll get to the end of the day and I'm like, man, like my body feels like it's hungry, but I don't feel like eating. I need to up something. I either, need to add a little fat, or I need to, have an electrolyte drink or something. So the number's not super important for me. I'm, when I say 190, I'm going off of a 30% margin of error. And if, some days it's a little low and some days it's a little high, that's fine by me. I honestly, that number all it does is give me, a target to shoot for. And if I come somewhere close, then I just adjust based on how I feel.
Yeah, I love it. Just to make sure that this is on the record, this is not somebody that I go to for like coaching advice or anything, but Lane Norton said something really awesome on a podcast, which was if when you're dieting for a show, if 5 or 10 grams north or south of protein or fat matter, you're not where you should be for your conditioning. And I thought that was actually very, very good advice. I mean, like if it makes that much of a difference getting up to your show, your physique should be on point and ready before you get to that point.
Absolutely.
At the end of Nate's prep too, the reason I wanted to ask on tracking, if you have any help for tracking fats, because tracking protein I feel like is relatively easy. Yeah. But depending on how you cook it, that changes everything. So I'm a just kind of cook it the same way every single day kind of guy, which is why I was really excited to talk about cooking, because like this entire show has been very deep about nutrition and like what's happened and like prep and dieting methods, but how to change your body composition, but making it more fun. But anyway, Nate, me, and I think most bodybuilders, as they get close to the end of their prep, you just want to reduce anything that could be throwing you off. You want to have all your systems in place. And so for me, like, it's just eating the exact same thing every single day. And I'm not on prep. I'm not going to like actually do a competition outside of guest posing for a couple of years. And so I have no reason to be this neurotic about my diet right now, but it's just easy, man. It's just like, it's great. Like, I do not think about food the entire day unless we're talking about food, because like, that's kind of what we do as coaches. But like, it's, I don't snack or anything. It's just, it's one less decision that you have to make. But with tracking towards the end of Nate's prep, what we started doing was trading out steaks for ground, just because we never had a clue with the steaks, man. We tried, but it's like, dude, okay, you're in the store and you're looking at them and you're like, this one's really marbled, this one's really lean. Okay, cut them in half. Well, this one has more marbling on the inside. You can't tell that when you're at the store. Like, you just can't win. And so and so we found ground to be, I don't know, I think a lot more accurate. Certainly there's some margin of error because of what you were just saying about food labels, but that at least gave us just something really easy to weigh. And it was just that, and then butter, and that was it. And we actually went away with the butter. So he was just a strict lion by the time he stepped on stage.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point. And that's kind of why I came up with the cookbook, and why the cookbook is not super strict is because everybody at the beginning of their journey, typically somebody starts a diet because they either, they want to lose weight, or they want to like change some health aspect. Yet everybody wants to skip to the very end where they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to like be within, like you said, 4 or 5 grams of my macros. And, I got to make sure that everything is perfectly weighed. And I'm like, you guys are like skipping everything. Like, unless you are after the ultimate results, which is what bodybuilding is, right? Like, I've got 3 weeks and I want to maximize my results to the very peak. Then that's when you get super, super basic with it. And I'm with you. I'm the most basic guy ever when it comes to losing weight. And that's part of why I've been posting all of my meals every day, to show people that when I'm serious about maximizing like those last couple pounds of fat, like trimming down as much as I can, I'm very basic, because that's the easiest to keep track of, and it's the easiest to replicate.
Absolutely.
But the problem is, somebody sees that and they go, oh, this guy's doing that, so that means I need to do that. I'm like, no, like, you're not at the point where you need to be that crazy. Like,
yeah.
And so that's why I did the cookbook, and the cookbook is not strict carnivore, whatsoever. There are some,
right.
But, it utilizes spices. It utilizes, kind of a keto approach sometimes, and sometimes it's animal based. But it's just to give people a sense that you don't have to be crazy strict if your diet is just overall health. Like, if you're just trying to get overall healthy, you just need to make better choices and start removing some of those foods and start adding some good foods. And then you'll realize that you start getting stricter and stricter as you go. You don't have to start, eating 3 pounds of ground beef and nothing else right out of the gate.
My jazz instructor in college, I went to school for jazz music performance, actually. He always taught us to find where your inability meets your ability and live there. And so you don't have to be twice the musician overnight. You don't have to transform your health overnight. That's impossible. That's unrealistic. But if you've been a C student, just be honest with yourself. If you look at this last year and you're like, okay, yeah, no, I definitely had some months where I was on my diet, and I had some months where I didn't give a crap and I was making every excuses in the book. Like, we can all look back and say that a little bit over this last year. Okay. So when you're looking at how your diet was last year and how your diet's going to be this year, if you change from being a C student to a B student, that is a huge step in the right direction. And that might be 15 pounds lighter, a little bit more muscle on your upper body. I don't know. Maybe you're just walking better. Maybe your gut's just a little bit more healed, and so you can tolerate food better. Now you're sleeping better. You're headed in the right direction. You probably didn't even have to go to the gym. And then after you're doing that, yeah, you're going to like how you look. You don't look like maybe you don't look like an IFBB pro, but you look better than you did the year before. And then you just start building that momentum from there. So I love it. So what's your favorite recipe in the book besides the kale smoothie?
Man, there's a bunch. Probably my favorite is a mix between two. So a little backstory is, a lot of these recipes are not stuff that's like been staples for me. A lot of it was, like, I'm super basic when it comes to making my own food. My wife used to joke with me. She would meal prep, and this was a couple years ago, and she would make all of her food, and, she would make, taco bowls or stir fries or, any number of different foods. And I'd be like, man, that looks good. And she's like, you can do it too, as I'm like turning off my rice cooker and pulling chicken out of the oven, and, just the most basic stuff. And then I started Carnivore, and I was still pretty basic. And then I started thinking, I'm like, man, I bet you can get like a little creative within Carnivore and still, jazz it up a little bit. And so a lot of these foods I've never eaten before. Chimichurri is probably the two chimichurri recipes I have in there are probably my favorites, and I'd never made chimichurri
Bro,
before in my life.
Oh, homemade chimichurri is bomb. We used to do that all the time, actually.
Yeah. So the first one I did was a marinated flank steak with lobster tail, and I did that one, and I was like, okay, like this is pretty good. Like, yeah, it's some herbs, right? And some people might have a negative to herbs, but for the most part, it's just a little bit, and it's not going to be that big of a deal. And then I made a creamy chimichurri, which is essentially chimichurri that you blend up with sour cream. And I was like, okay, this is really good. I was like, all right, what other dips can I make? And that's been the most fun for me is coming up with new dips, because that's your hardest, right? That's the first thing, when I tell people prior to starting carnivore, the first thing I tell people is stop drinking anything but water, like drink your water, and get rid of your condiments. Like, because nobody has any idea what they're eating through condiments. They're like,
so what's your primary fat source in the chimichurri? Because it's usually like an olive oil base, right?
Yeah. So the creamy chimichurri, the first one I made is olive oil. The creamy chimichurri, that's your sour cream. So it's essentially just, I believe this one is parsley, parsley, a little bit of vinegar, and then sour cream. And then it just
Nice.
you all just blend it up together, and it creates this awesome sauce. I made it with a chuck roast, and I was like, man, this is like a great dipping sauce. It's definitely a lot thicker, more of a sour cream consistency.
Yeah, I wonder what happened if you threw an egg in it. If you tried that,
I haven't. Yeah, you probably do it, and that's the thing, right? You can experiment with so many
might
things.
get frothy and weird, but
yeah, right.
egg yolks are kind of a go-to fat source for like pretty much all carnivores. So
yeah, so then that's what
I can't do eggs anymore though. I got spoiled. Duck eggs are so much better, so I just can't. It's just like it's like that proverb: a dog going back to its own vomit. It's like, man, once you go from chicken eggs to duck eggs, you never go back to chicken eggs again.
yeah. So that was the latest sauce that I made. The first in the B.E.B.B was a hollandaise sauce. And so, I mean, that's pretty strict. It has like half a tablespoon of lemon juice is the only thing that's, not strict about it. But yeah, that's using egg yolk as a base for the sauce. And I was like, man, like, okay, so you can get a little creative once you start getting it. And that was the whole reason for the cookbook, is just to show people you don't have to be crazy restrictive, and to give people ideas. And the most feedback that I get is they're like, oh yeah, I made this, I just left out the tomatoes. I'm like, perfect. That's the whole point.
Yeah, even better.
Yeah, just make it. And like,
because secretly you and I are like, okay, like hopefully they just helps them stay on track, and then they just have the less plants the better, man. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. And I got a bunch of hate for it, right? That's not carnivore. I'm like, well, I never claimed it was strictly carnivore. But it looks better. Like, and if I can present something to someone that has, color contrast, and it pops and it tastes good, and the overall difference is like a little bit of fresh herbs, or a little bit of, reddened tomatoes, or maybe some chili flakes, like that's worth it. And then somebody can go, okay, I'm going to make that, and then I'm going to leave it off. And now people are interested in this style of eating.
Yeah. And for anybody to tell you like, oh, you're not a real carnivore if you're eating plants, I'm like, man, like that makes no sense whatsoever. Like everybody has seen a dog eat grass, right? Like, what are you going to do when your dog's eating grass? You're going to run up to it and say, hey, you're not a real carnivore. Act like your species. Come on, you knucklehead. Like, no.
Well, and it's like, I get that all the time, right? Because that's my handle. My handle is CarnivoreJT. And people will go, oh, you call yourself a carnivore? And I was like, okay, so first of all, you guys are a little confused about a classification of animal and a diet, right? So no, I'm not telling you that I am a lion, hyper carnivore species. I'm telling you that I follow a diet. It sounds a little weird for me to be like carnivore diet JT, or, carnivore with a little bit of lean towards animal-based JT. Like, come on. And but then my follow-up is, hey, just wait until you figure out what classification a fox falls under. Like, you realize that there's a classification of carnivore that only eats 50% of their food from meat, right? They still eat berries, they eat plants when available, they eat eggs. Like, go find a video of a fox eating chicken eggs. Like, It happens. Like, you guys just need to chill. Nobody said I'm out here like pretending I'm a lion and I eat, barely dead food that, yeah, I'm a lion. I send my wife out to go kill the local the local cow, and then I come in at the end and I eat it while it's still breathing. Like, you guys need to chill.
On that note, oh sorry, did you have something you were going to finish with that? Like, I thought you were like halfway through the story.
No, that's it.
Okay. So raw food versus cooked food. I'm glad that you brought that one up. So I'm finding digestion to be like just way better with raw. I don't know if you've noticed the same thing.
I don't eat a ton of raw. And part of it is because you get your meat from, at least from what we've talked about,
I
a
shot
little
it.
more reputable source.
Yeah,
right.
I know exactly who killed it.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't quite found that. I haven't found a good fit down here for that. So buying meat from the supermarket, I'm not about to touch it raw. I'm gonna cook it.
Yeah, and just so that both of us are very, very clear for everybody listening, eating raw meat is a terrible idea, and you should never do it. Please, you should cook your meat. You should cook your food all the way through.
Yes, but that brings up another point. Like, people don't understand why it is that you are supposed to cook your meat. Like, and I'm only talking beef. I'm not talking chicken or pork, because those have other inherent issues.
Yeah. We're talking red meat.
But red meat is just to kill bacteria that somewhere along the processing line it picked something up.
Yeah, you're right. It's on the processing line. You're way safer with steaks, but still, if it's from the store,
yeah, and that's why it doesn't. I'm not gonna say somebody's gonna take this and they're gonna go get sick and they're gonna be like, "Well, this guy said."
That's why I said that.
Generally speaking, the bacteria on the outside of a steak cannot penetrate the outer layer of the steak, which is why you only need to cook the outside. As long as you sear the outside, it doesn't matter the doneness on the inside.
Yep.
Ground beef is different because it's literally the outside of the steak all ground into it, and so you don't have an outside and an inside. It's just all mixed up. But if you are typically going to buy your meat, unless you go and shake that guy's hand and you see exactly how it's made and you trust him 100%, cook your meat. Like, that's going to save you from a lot of issues. That being said, if I did have a source like that, I would definitely play around with like steak tartare and that kind of stuff. I don't know if I could do raw ground beef. The texture just might get to me. But yeah, if I had a better source, I would do raw. But as it is, I cook all of it just because I'm not really trying to play around with it.
Okay, so try this next time. Try just cooking one side of it and leave the other side raw. Just trust me, bro. Just try cooking one side and like as much as you want, but the other side has to be 100% raw. And then I don't know. I feel like that was kind of like when I was like, I don't know how I feel about this raw food. I started doing that, and then after a while, I was like, okay, no, the raw feels way better. And so I noticed it mainly in my bowel movements. Like I'll basically wake up and I'll be bam, first thing, one and done, and it's like 1 minute and without any effort whatsoever. If I eat food that's cooked all the way through, it'll take longer, and I might have to come back in like an hour or two later. If I'm trying to be as as non-graphic as possible right now. So I don't know. It feels like kind of more like chicken or pork, right? You know how like if you eat chicken, like you can feel it in your system for the next 12 hours. Red meat, it kind of goes in. It just kind of goes right through you.
Do you do that for all your red meat, or do you do it just for steaks and?
All red meat, yeah. Especially after talking with Dr. Kiltz at this point, after the way that he explained it to me, I was like, all right, I know I'm sold. Like everything that you're saying is making sense, and I feel better and better and better the less that I cook it. But here again, I do know exactly where every single piece of food that we have comes from. It either comes from the lamb that we just bought. I just finished all the lamb. God, that was a good lamb. I miss it. That the venison and the beef all comes from my parents. And then whenever we're like, I don't know, if we see something that looks good at a store, like we'll get, if we feel like splurging, we'll get some New York steaks or something.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes me sad because just before, so we moved down to Arizona 2 years ago. Just before we moved down, we split. I think we did a quarter cow with my sister from some of their family friends. And so like filled up our huge chest freezer. And this is before I went carnivore, but still I was like, man, this is awesome. And then we moved. I'm like, well, I can't transport all of this. Like we loaded up a big, truck and sent it down. I was like, I can't transport all this meat. So I had to give it all to her. And since then I haven't been able to find, well, I haven't looked that hard, but haven't been in the same situation. So yeah, part of me is like, oh, I wish I still had that. And then I would definitely, it would definitely be a little bit of a different situation for sure.
What do you do with the organs? Do you like make sure that they save them because you really want them, or you're like, I can give a crap, or like, do you hate them?
If I were to find somebody and I was like, hey, I want, a cow butchered, right? I would mix in some organs. I never did in the past, and I don't currently because I don't. This sounds weird, but so I bought in liver a couple times, and the only places I've been able to find it are frozen. And I don't like it because when I cook it, it makes the surface that I've been cooking at it have like some residual liver taste to it.
Yeah, dude, it's freaking annoying. I hate it. And
so I stopped cooking it.
Bro, I got an easy fix to that problem. You ready for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, eat it freaking raw, dude. Here again. But it has to be calf liver though. Calf liver and beef liver. Like I swear they taste different. If it says calf liver on it and it has like it's a ways before the sell by date and I'm feeling confident about it, like I'll do it and I'll eat it raw. And man, like if my daughter sees me eat, my daughter's 4 years old. If she sees me eating it, she comes up and she asks me something. She wants it. Like it's which is funny. I'm like, okay, what does that tell you about kids? What does that tell you about our human species? Like it becomes weird because we make it weird as a species. No, like that's perfectly natural and perfectly normal for a human being being at the top of the food chain to eat a raw liver. There should be nothing wrong with that. It actually tastes really good. But sorry, man, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people that give me crap.
Oh no, yeah, no, that's another thing, right? If I
get passionate,
if the point that I find, hey, I'm getting half a cow and I get liver, I'll definitely eat it raw. I still have some calf liver, but again, it's frozen. And I'm like, it's probably fine, but like I defrost it out, and then I'm like, man, I don't know if I can. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that's why I stopped making it.
That's a gut check, man. That's when you're like, all right, am I going to take my chances or not?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there's other things like I'll do oxtail, and I know it's not technically an organ, but it still falls under that same, category.
I kind of think of it the same way. Yeah. Do you do bone broth then?
Yeah, so I actually just made some. Tomorrow I'll have a video on that. A pretty good one because again.
Yeah, because I'm looking for ideas. I basically just no plants or anything. It's just like salt, water, and then it's broth. It's good.
Yeah, so I actually made it to cook a chuck roast in, and so I took. I'm a big fan of dry brining, and I'll explain the dry brining in a minute. Nice. So I dry brined chuck roast, and then got some bone marrow bones. I don't think it's actually called that, but that's what I keep saying. Just water and salt. Did it for about 40 hours in the crock pot. Took the bones out. Took all the bone marrow out, and then used the broth that was left over. Threw my chuck roast in there. Cooked that for about 6 hours after searing it. Cooked that for about 6 hours, and then the chuck roast came out amazing. So yeah, I made the bone broth to cook the chuck roast in, and then filtered out all of the leftover broth, and now it's sitting in my fridge. But it was literally 4 ingredients. It was the bone marrow, the chuck roast, salt, and water.
Wow, beautiful. That doesn't need any pepper, doesn't need any garlic, man. Because like some people literally trip when they realize that you're not using any seasonings.
Yeah, and I could make a killer, broth using some of those, but I was bound and determined to find the most basic, like to the letter of the law of B.E.B.B. And yeah, and then I just would take the chuck roast and dipped it in, the residual broth, and I was like, man, this is dynamite. Literally doesn't need anything else.
Right. Have you ever taken a carnivore dish or like something that you've prepared to a social gathering or something and have had people be like pleasantly surprised at how simple and good it is?
I haven't, not yet. I've made like your standard like burgers when people have come over. But I have not done that yet. I will at some point, but I typically I'll just let my wife handle that if we're going to take something, or let my wife, decide what we're going to make. I don't often make too many things like that, but there are a couple. Like the big reason I don't is kind of rambling here, but the big reason I don't is it just takes time, right?
Mhm.
If I'm going to do like a fancy, appetizer that I'm going to take to another event, it just takes time that I probably don't necessarily want to invest. But I do have I saw this idea on Instagram. It was going around for a little while, but it's deviled egg sliders.
Oh yeah,
I think,
I think I saw the same one actually. I was like, oh,
yeah,
those look pretty good.
that would be a killer appetizer that nobody would even know. Or
Sure.
there's a halloumi cheese. Halloumi is a Cyprus cheese that doesn't really melt, so you can fry it and crisp it up, and it's literally just that as a bun with sliders in between, and that's
Like
another
kind of
one
like
that
bread cheese almost.
yeah, it's very similar to bread cheese. It actually holds its texture when fried even more so than bread cheese.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but those are ones that I would not. There's a bunch of stuff in that cookbook that I would not feel bad taking at all. Some pork belly burnt ends, some just pork belly strips, that kind of stuff.
Pork belly is super underrated. We did. I have had a couple. I have had a couple people have histamine reactions to that. I'm not sure if you've ever noticed a difference between. And so it went away when they went to bacon. So I don't know if there's like something in the pork belly that gets like cured out by the time it becomes bacon. But.
Yeah, that could be. I actually just bought some pork belly from Costco, and the first time through, I was like, I'm just gonna cook it up and see what happens. Definitely needs some sort of curing process because it just tastes like bland pork with no seasonings if you do it that way. But yeah, there's probably something to be said about curing it, and I'll probably take a stab at a couple of those just because I can
Mhm.
buy a huge big slab of pork belly from Costco for like $3 a pound. I'm like, man,
Yeah.
it's worth it to me if I can, slice it up thin, find out my own curing methods, and then I don't have to worry about, any artificial stuff that's going into the curing process.
Oh yeah. Have you ever put pork belly in the air fryer?
So I don't have an air fryer. That's the other thing is I am very minimal on my gadgets. Like I don't have a
Mhm.
smoker. My flat top that I use is literally just an insert that sits on top of the barbecue. I don't have an air fryer. I don't have a pressure cooker. Uh, yeah, so I don't have a sous vide. Like none of the fancy stuff. All my stuff is super basic. And I've looked at it and I'm like,
I'm just
man, but
feeling
then
better and better, man. You're making me feel like a millionaire for owning this air fryer. I'm loving this. Keep going.
no, and I do like the first thing will be a smoker. And I'll probably do like an entire cookbook just on smoking because I'll just use that thing 24/7. And then I
Yeah,
might,
we got a smoker too. I'm excited for that.
yeah. So like people are like, oh, you got to throw it on the smoker. I'm like, bro, I don't have one. Like it's just, I got the barbecue that came with the house and that's what I use. And this
Side
is
note on the
not super fancy.
side note on the smoker. I want to run this one by you and see what you think of this. But I have a theory that smoke is a natural appetite suppressant. I
Okay.
don't I don't know if like there's anything, you know, scientific to back that up with or anything, but I just have noticed that if I eat food that's smoked, I don't know, I'm satisfied like twice as fast.
I think there's a lot to be said for, you know, being satisfied, also being like a positive reaction to what you're eating, right? So,
Sure.
to kind of explain that, I could set the super plain chicken breast that I've eaten, for all of my preps. So, say I take some chicken breast and I throw a fat source in there, and then I have the exact same macros and the exact same quantities, everything in a steak, and I could eat that steak, and at the end, I'll be like, okay, like I'm good. And I eat the chicken, and I'm like I did it, but man, I don't like. I feel like I want something else. So I think there definitely is something to be said for an extra level of flavor that helps with that satisfaction, which is another
Yeah.
reason I've tried so many variations of cooking because people get burnt out, right? They're like, man, I could never do just ground beef or just steaks. I'm like, that's because you cook terrible steaks. Like, it literally looks like you threw it in a cup, like a boiling pot of water, and pulled it out, and you're like, here we go. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I would hate my life too if that's what I ate every day.
Man, I think the lion diet is the hardest and scariest diet to start, but it's the easiest to stick with once you're there, though, because I was confused this time a year ago, man. Like, this is kind of when I started getting into coaching, like the hardcore carnivores. We got featured on like a couple other health podcasts, and so that's when people are coming to us that for the first time, like in my life, that knew way more about the diet than I did, because I'm the bodybuilding coach helping them get in shape, like after they've got their autoimmune issues and everything kind of figured out with the carnivore diet. So there were 3 or 4 of them in particular, all around the same time. I was so tripped out. Liddell is one of them, actually. She was on this show like I don't know, 10 or 12 weeks ago, but they were literally asking me, no, I want my meal plan to be red meat, water, salt, that's it, and actually just ground beef. Like, I don't even want steaks, like just ground, and I'm not even really cooking it. I throw it in the air fryer for like 2 seconds just to heat it up, like that. I'm like, wow, okay, you want me to write you a meal plan with this? Like, you don't want eggs yolk, you like no butter, nothing. You want no other foods in your plan. You don't even drink coffee. And they're like, no. And I'm like, holy crap, okay. Like, are you trying to be the easiest client in the world to coach? Because like, this is the easiest meal plan to write. Like, this will take me 2 seconds. Here you go. It's done. Right. And like, they just didn't need any variety. And so I think it's intimidating, but anything that you can do to get yourself in that direction to where it's just like, you're eating most of your food from red meat, you're eating mostly like a lion, man, I think that's one of the best decisions that anybody can make in their life, is to start making just a couple small changes to get you in that direction.
It's totally true. And
like, you won't want to go back. You don't see people go back.
no, and I actually saw a meme. It's the meme of the 2 people at like one of those little ticket counters, and one has a really long line to it, and one has like nobody there. And it was ex-vegans with the really long line, and ex-carnivores with like nobody there. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's true. And then people are like, well, there's people who have quit carnivore. I'm like, okay, stop. Like, people don't quit carnivore and then go vegan.
Right.
But once you start,
they'll go back to eating like processed foods and stuff, or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, what you do never see is someone going carnivore and then going straight vegan. Now, I'm sure someone's going to Google and find an exception to the rule, but generally speaking, like, I never really see it. But you listen to enough carnivore podcasts, and what do they all say? Oh, I tried this, I tried that, I tried that, I tried that, I tried vegan, I tried this, I tried that, I tried that, I tried that, carnivore, here we are.
Yeah, no, I've got 4 vegans that were hardcore vegan. Like, I'm talking like 5+ year vegans.
Yeah.
Who went carnivore. The episode that just dropped yesterday was a gal who was hardcore vegan for a long time and then just went hardcore carnivore. And so, yeah, what people will find is, if they start a little more elaborate in the beginning, right? They're making some foods, they're making, fake breads, they're substituting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As you start to feel better, you start to lose your desire to get creative.
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's what happened to me. Like, because even like a year and a half ago, man, like I was just trying like every different cooking method. I was like, oh, let's try air frying pork belly. Oh yeah, sorry, I wanted to mention that earlier. Air frying pork belly, pal. You got to try this sometime. It's just like a chunk of it. Like, you don't even need to cut it in strips. Just like fresh out of the package, like a little square. And then I would stick it on the air fryer. You got to salt it before putting in the air fryer, though, because then, I don't know, man, the salt like gets encrusted into the edges, and it gets super crispy around the outside. It's nice and juicy on the inside. Like, man, I don't know. I swear it tastes just like it tastes just as good as going to like a Chinese restaurant. And then I know this is here. If hopefully I don't lose like half my subscribers, like hardcore carnivore subscribers, from saying this, but throw some Chinese 5 spice on there. Oh my god, dude, that, like a little bit of sour cream on top. Bam, that is a meal for a king right there.
Yeah, and I love splitting hairs with people, and that's why a lot of my recipes include spices, because that goes back to, like, if that's where you're at in your diet, that we're gonna like split hairs over spices, then you are so far advanced.
I'm so proud of you, bro.
Yeah, dude, like that's where I'm at right now. Like,
that's a good text message to see.
I just gave up spices, right? Like, I have used spices and herbs from time to time the entire time, and I'm just down to salt.
Nice.
And so, but that's
it's
because
great,
like,
isn't it? Like you don't miss them anymore.
yeah, and that's because I'm trying to like squeak out every little bit of results that I can.
Yeah.
Not because
Have you noticed any improvement from that? Like have you been able to pinpoint like, oh yeah, I definitely have less inflammation or something?
I
Just from spices.
definitely I have less there's certain times spices, onion especially, where I'll feel like just the tiniest little bit of bloat and I can tell.
Yeah.
I'm like, especially if I have like a broth that's made with some onion, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
Okay.
okay, yep, like I can tell a little bit. I've noticed that I'm not quite as roller coaster on my weight, right? Like I'll
Mhm.
have little fluctuations, but day to day, it's a pound or two,
I've
not
noticed. Okay. I've noticed the same
four to
thing.
5 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Fascinating. That is fascinating.
yeah, and that's the point. Like if that's to the point where you're at, then yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about spices and let's talk about eliminating spices. But if you are, a standard American and you're 40 pounds overweight, like that is not what you need to be focusing on right now. Like you can like use all the spices you want. That is not what's gonna to hold you up from accomplishing, your health and fitness goals.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, my brother, we are up at the end of the hour. I know that you are always booked end to end, and so I would definitely not want to be taking any more of your time, my man. But where can people go to find out more about you?
I am on literally every. Okay, I'm saying literally somebody will find something. I am on all the major social media platforms. Carnivore JT.
It'll be that same. It'll be that same guy that unsubscribed. He already unsubscribed back when we were talking about spices. Remember?
Yeah. He's like, I'm done with this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Screw these knuckleheads. They don't know what they're talking about.
I'm active on all of them. Some of the platforms I don't like, but I'm on there. Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
Yeah, you're crushing it. Like, because I'm on all the same platforms, and you are literally consistent on every single platform. So yeah, check him out, guys. He is everywhere.
Also, the website, theinnercarnivore.com. You can find information on apparel, the cookbook, the podcast, the Inner Carnivore Podcast. That's on YouTube. We are on iTunes, finally. Finally got that squared away. iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio.
Nice. Yeah. When we started Carnivore Coach's Corner, that was that was like the nightmare. It was like everything else we were able to get on every single platform, but man, Apple just took like 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, that was a pain in the butt, but we got it. We're good. So,
yeah. All right, man. Well, it's not a matter of if we're recording again; it's when we're recording again on what platform. So, if you're following us, guys, we'll pick up this conversation at some point soon.
All right, I appreciate it, man.
All right. Well, that's it for this week's session, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening. Make sure to let us know what you thought. You can do that directly from your podcast app, or you can DM Coach Mark or myself on Instagram. You can also email your feedback and questions for us and more specific topics you'd like us to teach on next. TikTok. If you are on TikTok, if you've been listening for the last hour, then you definitely know that we are totally active on TikTok at Carnivore Coach's Corner, throwing out bite-sized carnivore tips from top nutritionists and coaches like JT Carnivore and athletes that are putting into practice what we preach on this channel. We are showing lots of meal prep, cooking tips, and budgeting hacks. Lately, also, we are busting bad coaches that are spreading misinformation. So, big warning, if you are a bad online coach spreading misinformation, selling bullcrap workout plans that's hurting people's health, we are going to call you out, and we do it all the time. If you need some gym motivation, look no further than our workout podcast called the SupersetYourLife.com podcast. We are well over 200 episodes on that channel, and it's available on the same platform that you're listening to now. Just type in Superset Your Life, all one word, into your search bar, and you will see our black and white podcast logo pop up. It is a podcast specifically recorded to listen to while you work out. We regularly interview professional bodybuilders and judges, top nutritionists, leadership experts, stand-up comedians, and top athletes from SupersetYourLife.com. We keep the focus on health-first bodybuilding, faith, and family. My wife, Taylor, and I are the hosts of that show as of 3 years and growing, and Coach Mark Ennis has been an enormous part of all we do there. Mark and I are both on Instagram and offer private one-on-one consultations as well as coaching services. Links to scheduled coaching calls can be found on our Instagram bios or in the show notes of this podcast. And one last reminder before we sign off, leaving a review only takes about 10 seconds, maybe even 8 or 9 seconds if you're really fast. If you're on Spotify, where you can see in the show notes right below that, it says Q&A. And bam, just like that, you can tell us exactly what you think. We will respond when we record the following week, either by reading your review or discussing the topic that you'd like to know more about, or even by getting to work on whatever critiques that you have about how we can continue to improve this show. And that's how we communicate, as a dialogue, not a monologue, in this back and forth conversation called Carnivore Coach's Corner. Thanks again. Share with a friend if you found it helpful. We'll catch you next week on session number 38.